Well,
because
so
I
what
never,
did you mean by
because,
authentic? Because you only compared him to other black quarterbacks.
right, but I never mentioned authentically black. To even put that in quotations is a lie, right? Because I never said it. I said he's authentically himself. He remained authentically himself when people asked him to change. When he
But
was
you
at,
are saying, you did say at the end, Ryan, there's a whole culture that he's
yes,
representing. Okay,
yes,
what culture are you referring to?
I'm referring to the culture of African Americans. I'm referring to the black culture. I'm referring to a quarterback that comes from South Florida. And when he goes back to do his camps or to do his community work, he goes back to those communities.
Ryan Clark joining us today in an interview that really he set up. He reached out to me because I posted an article that was written about him that he thought was not representative, not accurate about him. We're going to discuss it. Does he think that Lamar Jackson should win the MVP because he is authentically himself or because he's authentically black? That's sort of the nuance here that we're going to get into. And it has come up on a number of podcasts. So we're going to address it directly with Ryan. And I appreciate him reaching out to me to have this conversation. We're also going to talk about his relationship with Sage Steele, which has come under a little bit of scrutiny. And when they were at ESPN together, and also his opinion of Aaron Rodgers has also been in the news lately. So Ryan Clark is our guest. Please subscribe, hit subscribe so you never miss an episode of the Michele Tafoya podcast, she said, on Rumble, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Please subscribe. We appreciate it. Ryan Clark is next. Ryan Clark, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your willingness to come on and talk about stuff that other people are saying and that you're just open enough to do this. So thanks in advance.
Yeah, no problem.
So I reached out to you. You saw that I tweeted an article in which you were criticized by Outkick. And I think that probably you and Outkick don't have the best of relationships. What started all of that, sort of that
Yeah,
discontent?
I don't really know, to be honest. I don't follow them, but a lot of times people who disagree with certain things that I say will send it to me because they get their news or get their information or sort of get their opinion based on what some of those sites or some of these people may say about me. And so I'll understand it or get some type sort of understanding of it through other people. And I think when I saw that you posted it, honestly, the way I even knew it was something that you posted was someone came to me in my DMs and was saying, Michele Tafoya killed you. And I was like, well, I don't really understand, how she would do that. But then I did see that you retweeted the story. And as someone who I knew, right, someone who had been in the business, I'd spoken to after football games, I
Right.
figured I would be willing to have a conversation with you. And I say this all the time. I'm willing to have conversations with people with differing views because how will I ever learn the not necessarily opposing side, but the opposite side of what I think? And how can I bridge those two sides and bridge those people if we don't have an understanding of one another?
Well, I'm glad you bring that up, and let's start there. It was alleged, Sage Steele, when she sued ESPN, it
Yeah.
was alleged in her lawsuit that you would not go on the set with her after she said some controversial things on Jay Cutler's podcast about the
Mhm.
vaccination and so forth. Was that part of her lawsuit false?
No, so that part of her lawsuit wasn't false. Now, in truth, I have worked or I did work with Sage after that. So that is false in the sense that we never worked together after her Jay Cutler appearance. But what did happen was I had no issue with Sage Steele being a conservative. I had no issue with Sage Steele's vaccination stance. I think you and I both know, Michele, that Sage Steele being a conservative was like the worst kept secret at ESPN, right? I think it was 2017 in the Super Bowl in Houston, we were working together. And around that time, there were some things that people found insensitive about the way she addressed the travel ban protest at LAX. And at that time, her daughter was receiving some backlash and being treated or bullied because of her mother's statements. And I sat with Sage that day and I told her, it doesn't matter what your thoughts are. I don't feel like your kids should be exposed to hate or evil or negativity because of what we say. I said, I don't feel like children should be involved in that. And so I was there with her and talked through that situation. Also, obviously, her stance during Colin Kaepernick's protest. They were very honest and she felt a certain way. And I had no disagreement, or I had not necessarily disagreement. I had no issue with that. And we remained at least cordial through all of those things. The one thing and the only thing I took offense to in her Jay Cutler interview was her saying that with President Obama's father not being a part of his life, why would he want to consider himself black? As a black man who understands that no matter what President Obama decides to check off as his race, he's going to be seen by an entire country as a black man. He's going to be viewed if policemen say the suspect is a black, tall, slender, light-skinned man, President Obama would fit that description. He's also a man that is married to a black woman, also a man who was raising two young black daughters. And I felt that that was disrespectful to say, why would someone with that blood running through their veins want to represent that culture? And because of that, I was uncomfortable in working with her. So what I told the producer that day, Michele, was, hey, would it be possible if Matt Berry was to ask me my questions? If he was able to conduct my segment? Because what I know is this, and you know it as well, chemistry is a large part of TV. It's a large part of our ability to be able to entertain. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want my discomfort with what she said to show on screen. And so that day I asked, could Matt Berry do my segment? They said no. And they said, well, we're going to have to tell Sage that because they didn't want her to be uncomfortable. And I was like, I don't either, which is why I'm asking for Matt to do that segment. A few weeks later, a little bit later, everything had blown over. My feelings weren't the same. I felt like I could work with her in a very cordial way and be entertaining and be respectful in when she asked me questions. And so I was able to work with her then. But for that day, I was uncomfortable doing it.
Fair enough. And what is your relationship like with her now, or is it just non-existent because she's no longer ESPN?
Well, she doesn't work there, so we don't speak. I obviously wish her all the best in all of her endeavors. And I think, she now has found a place where entertainment wise, she feels like she fits. She feels like she has a voice and she has a passion. And I think we all should be entitled to that, whether you agree or disagree. And I believe that's why we have all of these different platforms we can create.
Yeah. It really is interesting. And sometimes it's overwhelming, the number of podcasts that are out there. And that's why I'm so appreciative of you coming on and talking to me. Yeah. It's another voice that you have disagreed with is Aaron Rodgers. And that shouldn't be shocking news to anyone because Aaron's a lightning rod. You're an opinionated guy. But you called him a fraud and you said he says some asinine things. Where did you come by that? Why do you call him a fraud?
Well, I think to be on a former player's podcast and Pat McAfee.
Yep.
Right. And to speak of former players and say that they now feel like they're the stars. Right. When you're actually on the podcast being paid, by the way. Right. And Pat McAfee later on said, I pay Aaron Rodgers because he's worth this. Look what he's done to my evaluation. So being paid by that former player to give your opinion, right? So you're doing the exact same thing that former players are doing. You're being paid to do that while on a former player's show who is infinitely more famous as in his post career as a pundit than he was during his playing career.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like you've been around a long time, Michelle. You know, to be famous as a punter is very difficult,
It's very difficult.
no matter how good you are.
Right.
Right?
And Pat had some interesting days during his punting career, and his rise to fame is a unique situation. You're absolutely right.
Right. But Pat's rise to fame, at least in my opinion, helps people like me. Right? It shows that a player can now transcend to a host. A player can now transcend to carry a platform. So I'm extremely grateful for what he did. But when Aaron is sitting there saying those things, you are basically railing against the exact reason you're getting the opportunity to say what you're saying. And so I felt like that was disingenuous. I felt like it was asinine to be saying, along with hypocritical. Now, since that situation, Michelle, and I'll be honest here, since that situation, I've communicated with people within not only the locker room he's currently in, but locker rooms he was formerly in, who I didn't reach out to, who reached out to me to amen what I've said. I also spoke with someone recently who used to be extremely close to Aaron Rodgers, who also wanted to commend me on what I said and what I wanted to do more than anything. And I think my first response, right, in calling him a fraud because of things I know about him through other stories that have played with him and coached with him, I understand how that could have rubbed people the wrong way. I understand how that could have rubbed Aaron the wrong way. And I think he was, because of that, entitled to his response to me, where he talked about the brooch, where he was used profanity. Like, I get it. You felt like I tested you. You felt like I tried you. And which is why I responded again on my social media, and I'm done with it. But those were my feelings about what he said. I felt like it was an unwarranted attack of former players and analysts on the network you're actually filming for at the time.
Yeah.
Right? That would be like me coming on here with you, Michelle, and railing or discrediting or some way insulting people who have done your job, people who are doing your job while I'm on your show. That's just not something I would do.
So, did you have any kind of relationship with Aaron when you were both players in the league?
No. Oh, no. I think, and it's so funny that this happened because I've repeatedly throughout my career and post-career said he was the best player I ever played against.
Okay.
Like, I truly believe he's one of the greatest talents to have ever played this game. But no, we didn't have a relationship. But in not having a relationship, it wasn't negative or positive. It just was. Right. I saw him as a player. This is who he was. And, I think another thing that sort of rubbed me the wrong way, at least when he responded, was it got into all of this vaccination status stuff, which I kind of
found that
felt
interesting too. Why do you think he went there?
I think we all have a crutch, and we also all know our audiences, right? If you have an audience who is anti-vaccination, which I'm sure he learned in, 2021, when he had sort of the whole, I don't want to call it scandal, but the whole misunderstanding that NFL execs or people thought he was vaccinated because of the way he answered questions. It turns out he wasn't. And so I think he feels that he was railroaded or he was used as some sort of example. And people who are on that same side of the vaccination conversation tend to agree with him that he's being treated a certain way because of that, because of some sort of agenda. And it's just not true. I mean, I think, you've worked in the business long enough, and, especially seeing the way you work now, I can't see Michele Tafoya being told to say something and saying it because someone else tells her that.
Yeah, no.
And I'm the exact same way. For instance, in 2017, there were times that I wasn't asked certain questions on certain shows because of a fear of what my answer may make the network look like. Oh, I'm sorry about the fireworks going off,
Yeah, that
may
was
may make the network look like, or some backlash they may receive. And then those same thoughts in 2020 were more welcomed. And so I began to get more airtime with the same exact thoughts, because I'm not going to change my thoughts or be used as some sort of tool for someone to express their opinions and agendas through me.
Well, that was an accusation in a whole nother vein made by Outkick. They suggested that the NFL agent that was representing you in your negotiations with ESPN at one time was the same agent that was representing a lot of players that you
Mm-hmm.
were defending. And so they felt like you had a conflict of interest. What was your response to that? The world's in constant state of change. That's the only guarantee in life. So, like many of you, I wanted to understand how to prepare my finances, my portfolio for turbulent times, because we're in them and we're probably going to be in them forever. So that led me to learn more about American Independence Gold. Now, gold and silver historically have stood the test of time. We're talking about in wartime, during recessions, during market crashes, because they're not just investments. Gold and silver represent stability and peace of mind for families like mine and like yours. And right now, I'm holding a gold bar from American Independence Gold in my hands. I can tell you it's real. I can tell you it's heavy. And I can tell you it could be yours when you open a gold IRA with $10,000 or more. American Independence Gold is a veteran-owned company. We love that. They support military families and first responders. Plus, they cover custodial fees for life on qualifying accounts. You need to check into it. And here's how you take your first step toward diversifying your portfolio with American Independence Gold. Text the word gold to 717767 for a free investment guide. That's gold to 717767. Discover how gold and silver could fit into your portfolio with American Independence Gold. Text gold to 717767 now. Well, that was an accusation in a whole nother vein made by Outkick. They suggested that the NFL agent that was representing you in your negotiations with ESPN at one time was the same agent that was representing a lot of players that you
Mm-hmm.
were defending. And so they felt like you had a conflict of interest. What was your response to that?
I think the first thing is, the NFL agent that they're mentioning is David Mulligetta.
Mm-hmm.
We are real life friends. We don't have a quote unquote business relationship. In those situations, I no longer have an agent for TV. And so what he'd helped me do was look over the numbers, read through the contract. He's also a lawyer, to make sure that all the black and white and the fine print was detailed in a way that was fair to me. Um, and as far as his clients, like, yeah, some of his clients are actually close to me. CJ Stroud is someone I've become close to. Jalen Ramsey is someone I've become close to. And so in those situations, I don't necessarily know if, they're pointing to that as to I give them some preferential treatment. Here's what I can say in all honesty. If I like a player, whether I know them or not, I do try my best to see the good in the person. I do not change what I see on film. I am not going to lie. I am not going to jeopardize my integrity. I'm not going to jeopardize my authenticity as it comes to doing this job at a high level because I think someone's a good person. I do know how to not attack the person. I do know how to not make it individually personal as to their character, but football is football, and that has to be looked at from the lens of a former football player in the best way possible.
And you were one of the best defensive backs that I saw play for the Steelers. So you're saying that you can, on television, definitely critique someone and their playing style and keep that separate from your relationship with them as a human being.
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you what was one of the hardest things, Michelle, I've had to do. Down the stretch last season when the Pittsburgh Steelers weren't playing well. One, I have a tremendous admiration for Coach Tomlin
Yeah.
and for what he meant to my career, and we have a true friendship. And, the team wasn't playing well. And I had to talk about the head coach of a football team that wasn't playing well, like I would talk about the Jets head coach, like I would talk about the Baltimore Ravens head coach. And I remember doing it, and social media is sometimes not a real place, and getting all of these comments from Steelers fans that I had turned on Coach Tomlin and that I forgot where I come from and what he had done for me. And in a way, I did feel bad because I didn't want it to be that I was piling on to him. But I saw him in the offseason at the commissioner's dinner, and he said, yeah, man, he's like, it's so funny when people run up to me and be like, hey, man, did you hear what RC said about you? Or did you hear what RC said about the team? And he goes, yeah, I heard him and he's right. And it was one of those moments that made me feel like, okay, in the way that I approach doing my job, if I can continue to be respected by my peers, then I'm doing it in the right way. But that was a situation for me where those two things kind of came to a head.
I have the utmost respect for him as a head coach and as a human being. He is one of my favorite coaches ever to have covered, by the way, Mike Tomlin, for whatever it's worth. But let's go into the last thing I want to cover with you, and that is Lamar Jackson and the MVP discussion. You're chuckling already. First, I want to introduce for anyone who may not have seen this particular segment on ESPN, you describing Lamar and why winning is so important for him right now. Let's go ahead and roll this, John, and Ryan and I can listen together, and then we'll comment on the other side.
Lamar Jackson is in the conversation with Patrick Mahomes for best player in the entire world. But what do the best players do to become great? They show up in the biggest moments. This is the biggest moment of Lamar Jackson's entire career. And let's be real. Lamar Jackson is playing for more than himself. And I know we've had the Doug Williams win Super Bowls, Patrick Mahomes, we've had the Russell Wilsons, but Lamar Jackson is different from all of them. Lamar Jackson has gone against the status quo, gone against the familiar since the moment he was drafted by not choosing an agent and staying with his mother, allowing her to be part of his representation by the hair he wears, by the way he talks, by the way he plays. This is bigger than Doug Williams. When John Harbaugh sat on the sideline next to Lamar Jackson during his first run as an MVP and said, do you know how many kids are going to go buy number 8 jerseys because of you? Because they look like you, because they talk like you, because they come from places that you came from, and he never switched up. He never became anything but Lamar Jackson. He never changed his style of play. He just improved on it. He never changed the way that he directed or he behaved in press conferences. He just improved on it. And he never changed the way that he led a locker room. He just improved on it. But it stayed authentically Lamar Jackson. And for that reason, when he wins or when he loses, the conversation is about so much bigger than just who he is as a player. So this is imperative that Lamar Jackson not only wins this game, but he wins the Super Bowl, because it's an entire culture on the back of that jersey, not just the name Jackson.
So what I want to get at here is why it's so important for this one guy and why he's different from any other black quarterback who has won a Super Bowl or who has represented.
Okay, so can I ask you a question? Because this is something I want to know, right? So when we talked about the MVP recently, and I said I thought Lamar Jackson should win it, but I said Josh Allen has also had an MVP caliber season and a great season. In the Outkick article that was posted, or the quote, it says, in quotations, he's authentically black, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like we just listened to the entire segment, which I have before. I never mentioned that Lamar Jackson was authentically black.
Did you any other?
I did not, right? So there are my issues with some of these, and we could say it, some of these far right, whether they're sites or networks or Twitter handles.
Well, so what did you mean by authentic? Because you only compared him to other black quarterbacks.
Right, but I never mentioned authentically black. So to even put that in quotations, when speaking about me as part of your title is a lie, right? Because I never said it. I said he's authentically himself. And what I meant by that was he remained authentically himself when people asked him to change. When they told him, when so many other times we see these people sit at these tables at the draft and there are these huge entourages around them. And around them could be women, it could be men, it could be their agents, they could be white, they could be black, they could be Asian, they could be all of these things. It was Lamar Jackson and his mother, who many people, especially in the media, when they found out she would be representing him, told him that it would never work, right? Told him that it was a mistake. But what did he do? He said, this is my decision. I'm going to remain authentically myself. When he was
you are saying, you did say at the end, Ryan, there's a whole culture that he's representing. Yes. Okay, yes. What culture are you referring to?
I'm referring to the culture of African Americans. I'm referring to the black culture. I'm referring to a quarterback that comes from South Florida, and when he goes back to do his camps or to do his community work, he goes back to those communities. He goes back to the kids that are going to be raised like Lamar Jackson, who are going to walk the same hallways as Lamar Jackson. That's the community and that's the culture I'm talking about. I'm talking about a person who is still close friends with a high schooler and still shows love to a high schooler who is now the rapper Kodak Black, who he grew up with, who many would advise because of some of the things that young man has gone through, that you pull yourself away from that you separate from that. He has never done that. He remained authentically himself. That doesn't mean he had to remain. And the difference is when we talk about a Russell Wilson or a Patrick Mahomes, these are players that from the inception of their careers have been universally accepted in the way that they play, in the way that they behave. Lamar Jackson has not. And so for them, it was easier to remain their authentic selves. And I never said that they didn't, but it was easier for them to remain their authentic selves because there was never any pushback on who they were. With Lamar Jackson, there's been pushback on the way he plays, right? And so they said that sort of play won't win you a championship. You need to change. That sort of play can't be Super Bowl caliber, so you should play a different position.
Well, there are plenty of college quarterbacks who were told they can't play quarterback in the NFL. If you're referring to that initial, hey, why don't you play running back? And he said no, and I give him credit for that. Because you could talk about Julian Edelman. You can talk about, Scott Frost in Nebraska. Basically won a national championship with Nebraska, never was going to play quarterback in the NFL. You could talk about Tim Tebow. There were a lot of guys who were told they can't play quarterback in the NFL. And so I'm just wondering why you feel it's so much more important for Lamar than others.
I mean, I think I've tried to explain that, and maybe I'm not explaining it well. I don't believe that culturally our community is as attached to a Patrick Mahomes. Now, let's be first clear. Doug Williams is the most important, right? Without Doug Williams in 1987 showing that he can win a Super Bowl playing quarterback and leading the way that he did, then we don't even continue to move to these points, right? Randall Cunningham is important. Warren Moon is important. So I'm not disregarding that. But when you think about Patrick Mahomes, the mainstream accepts him and has always accepted him. And he's more familiar to everyone than a Lamar Jackson is. When you think about a guy who was raised in professional baseball dugouts, who is married, right, to a white woman whose mother is a white woman, he is more familiar to what the mainstream is than a Lamar Jackson would be. When you think about a Russell Wilson and the way that he was raised and the way that he communicates and the way that he dresses, also at the time of being drafted, was married to a white woman. And I believe I forget what year it was 17 or 18, when confronted with Black Lives Matter, because Michael Bennett had wore a t-shirt, he was very clear that all lives mattered. And so there's never been a pushback on who Russell Wilson was. Actually, Richard Sherman was as well. And I want to say this to be clear. None of those are bad things. I don't believe those things are wrong. What I'm saying is those things make you more easily palatable to mainstream media. For instance, right, I get a ton of pushback because I will speak up for equality, right? Because I will say, no, in these situations, I feel like these people should be heard. But I'm also, Michele, the same man that when Harrison Butker received all of the backlash for his speech, that reached out to him and asked him first, Harrison, would you come on our show? And he was like, no, man, I don't want to do anything publicly. And I asked him, I said, would it be okay if I could call you so I could understand what you were and what you are trying to say? And we had a 30-minute conversation. That's one of the best conversations I've had in a long time about understanding, about clarity. Same thing during the election, right? I saw him make a post about President Trump, and I asked him a question because I want to see and understand, because I respect him, right? And so to me, it's never about just color. It's about understanding. It's about having an opportunity to show that just because it looks different, just because it sounds different, just because it's unfamiliar at the point, it doesn't make it bad. And I think for me, that's my reason for feeling that Lamar Jackson is so important, because it doesn't look the same, because it doesn't sound the same, because he doesn't dress the same way, because he does, and you may not ever see it, when I post something of Lamar and saying how great he is as a player, and the numbers of white tweeters or white people that slide up, oh, that illiterate quarterback, that can't talk, right? And so all of those things, and I believe that Lamar can talk. His dialect is just more centered, and it is learned from where he's from. And so I think those sorts of pushbacks for me make it all important for him to be able to win, first for himself, but yes, for other Black quarterbacks who will come after Lamar Jackson, who are extremely similar.
I just wonder, Ryan, what you think about when we get to the end game. It's like, I'll put it in terms that I'm familiar with. Okay, so yeah, I was one of probably the first few female sideline reporters. Okay, fine. I didn't want to wear that badge. I wanted to just be a really damn good journalist. That's all I cared about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then there were Hispanic people who came to me and said, my daughters can look up to you. And I thought, well, that's nice, but they should just look up to themselves. And it's not about me being Hispanic that makes me a good journalist. Brunettes versus blondes. I mean, at what point do we get to, it's just the person, and they don't have to represent, because I feel like you mentioned Doug Williams. We've talked about Warren Moon, Randall McDaniel, or Cunningham. Thank you. Randall McDaniel's a good friend of mine. Randall Cunningham, Cordell Stewart. We can talk about all these Black quarterbacks who have come down the line. So and Lamar's won the MVP twice.
Yeah.
Now he's a hell of a player. I've seen it in person. I've seen him do things that are mind-boggling to me, that have blown my mind.
Yeah, no doubt.
So we can acknowledge that. But I'm just wondering, at what point are we going to get to the other stuff doesn't matter? He's just a great player. I used to have trouble sleeping, and I don't anymore, and I'm going to tell you why. But first, listen up. I know you or someone you know has trouble sleeping. I think it's kind of a pervasive problem in the world. And I was a skeptic about this because, I've taken melatonin in the past. You don't need to take a pill. You don't need a prescription. You need sleep cream. So listen, I'm thinking, what? You going to put a cream on at night and it's going to help you sleep? Yeah, it does. I tried it once and I was convinced. And I was a skeptic, but Sleep Cream uses an all-natural CBD combined with the finest essential oils. Some of it just smells great, lavender, rose. So I'll put it on the bottoms of my feet or maybe the insides of my forearms and wrists and elbows. And within minutes, my body is relaxed enough to go to sleep. You can find them at sleepcream.com. Try it for a couple of nights. See if it works for you as well as it does for me. And if you don't experience better sleep, here's the great thing. Sleep Cream will refund your purchase guaranteed. You don't have to return anything. Go to sleepcream.com. Sleep, C-R-E-M-E. So it's spelled a little differently. CREME.com, sleepcream.com. And for the next few weeks, use the code GAMEDAY, all one word, at checkout, and you can get free standard shipping on your order. That's GAMEDAY at checkout, all one word, for that free standard shipping on your first order. So if you're ready for your best sleep ever, and really, who's not? Sleep, CREME.com, sleepcream.com, CREME, sleepcream.com. But I'm just wondering, at what point are we going to get to the other stuff doesn't matter? He's just a great player.
I think we can get to that, but on the other side of that, Michelle, I will have to ask you this. Why was it when Lamar Jackson, who statistically is having his greatest season of all time, who is having a better season, obviously, than both of his two MVP seasons, why is it that when I say Josh Allen is having an amazing season, he's had an MVP caliber season, but I believe that Lamar Jackson is the MVP, that all the Bills pages and networks and radio stations, all of the Bills fans, the Outkick, in a situation where I never mention color, I never mention race, why do all of them say, of course you believe that because you're racist, you have to go with the black guy? And so
that I will not stand up for that. Listen, any fan base is going to rally behind their guy. The Eagles are going to rally behind Saquon, right?
Absolutely.
And the Ravens are going to rally behind their guy. And there is no sense or sensibility to that. Like, fans are nuts, and fan pages and all of that are get nuts about that stuff. And any stadium we ever walked up into, whether I was with Madden or Chris Collinsworth, they would say, Coach, why do you hate the Raiders? Why do you hate the Broncos? Why do you hate the Steelers? It's like, what are you talking about? You always cheer for the other guy, because every fan base feels dissed by every analyst on television. They just, that's why I tend to ignore them.
Yeah, but I'm comfortable. I'm wholly comfortable with you telling me that your guy is better. I'm wholly comfortable with you telling me that I'm stupid for thinking Lamar Jackson should win the MVP. But in the same sense, that's not what Outkick wrote about. In a situation where I said nothing about race, where I said nothing about color, it immediately went to that because one of those players is black and one of those players is white. And so in the sense, can I finish?
Yes,
but
absolutely.
In the sense where you're saying, hey, how do we get to a point to where it doesn't matter? It's in situations to where it doesn't matter to me that it's still brought up. And it does make you want to rally behind those who are pushed back against. It does make you want to rally behind those who have been marginalized, right? And I think, and you ask, like, when is it going to stop? I think it'll probably stop when we stop having first, right? And in the sense of, we had President Obama, And it was a big deal because it was the first.
Mm-hmm.
In all of the years that this country has been the thing, it was the first time.
Right.
You know, in what was it? I can't remember, 3 years ago, maybe 2021, I think, 2022, maybe, when Philadelphia and the Kansas City Chiefs meet. It was the first time that two African American quarterbacks had ever started a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, at that time, that was number one and, you know, and number two in their position. And it was a great thing, but it was the first time it happened because of history. And I think we will get to a point, like nobody now looks at Lisa Salters as just saying, hey, she's this black sideline reporter, or she's just a female sideline reporter. But it's because also we've had a Michele Tafoya.
And a
right?
Pam Oliver.
And a Pam Oliver. And, you know, so we've had to have these people who had to be first, and those things had to be talked about until it got more familiar, until it became more common. I do believe that now we are in a position, especially at the quarterback position, and I can be very honest about this, where I believe that conversation is dying out. I believe that the history of the position is something that can be spoken about in that way. Michael Vick did the evolution of the black quarterback this season. I do believe we're getting to a point to where the best player plays that position, to where there's too much money involved. It's too important for them to be good. They're picking the best player to play that position. And so I think
the highest paid player in the NFL right now is Dak Prescott. Isn't that right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so I won't sit up here and be like, oh, that position, they still don't want these guys, because they do, because they want to win. And so I think that we are getting to that point, Michele, but I do believe, and this is just my opinion, I do believe Lamar Jackson is special. I do believe some of the vitriol he receives, some of the pushback he's received, I do believe it's been unfair, but I also think it's because he was unfamiliar in many ways. And you mentioned Tim Tebow. You and I both know Lamar Jackson was miles and miles better than Tim Tebow.
God, yes,
but,
yes.
Yeah, but Tim Tebow
question.
got an opportunity to play quarterback. Julian Edelman wasn't going to be a quarterback. Eric Crouch, these guys. And so I think,
but you know, and a lot of this I got, by the way, I watched a lot of different opinions about this before you and I connected here. Marcellus Wiley, another very opinionated black former football player, has taken you to task on this. And so I find it just interesting, like, you know, because we start to slice and dice so much, like, you know, Leslie Visser was the first female sideline reporter. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And maybe I was the first Hispanic. I don't know. I don't care. And so then is it going to get to be, you know, now we're going to have the first trans this or that. We're going to have the first, you know, asexual. I mean, at what point? Because people want to be the first. So they're going to try to distinguish themselves down to this tiniest little, you know, variable. And we're starting to lose just our common humanity of we're all people. We're all people.
I think that the thing about it is, Michele, it's meant to be celebrated, right? We somehow twist it into a negative. It was meant to be celebrated that Leslie was on the sideline. Mm-hmm. It was meant to be celebrated that you were on the sideline. But there is so much hate, so much negativity, that along with those who would applaud you and cheer you on, there are going to be those that continue to push back because you are unfamiliar or were unfamiliar until it's something that we can get used to. I think, you know, you mentioned whether it's trans or whatever it is, like, you're right. When the first trans sideline reporter, you know, speaks her first or his or their first word, it's going to be a big deal. When Michael Sam decided to tell the world that he was a gay man, it was a big deal. When Carl Nassib did the same,
Yeah.
It was a big deal, and it's almost funny, like I met Carl this off season, and we've spoken a few times, and I can be honest with you, we've never spoken about that. Right. It's never been something that's been a part of our conversations. We've talked about his business meetings and different ways that athletes and business world works, but we've never spoken about that. And so I do think we can move to a place where you get past those things. I want to, I do my best in many ways to not bring it up unless I think it's important culturally, unless I do believe that it's a factor. The hard part about that, right, is recently I spoke on the Gerard Mayo firing,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, I feel like it was a tough situation to be in. I don't know what was really expected of him in his first year. I think they gave up on him a little too soon. I don't believe it's a race thing. I don't, right? I believe that Robert Kraft understands he wants to win now, and he believed that Gerard Mayo, based on this year, his opinion was that he wasn't ready to win now, and there's some other guys who could be better. I totally understand that. But, right, everything for me was, of course you believe that because he's black. It's not, right? But there are these people who say when you will speak up for people who, in my case, who are like me, sometimes who are unlike me, who I feel like are being mistreated, that's all you care about. No, I care about everybody. But at this point, these are the group of individuals that I feel like are being pushed to the wayside. So these are the group of individuals I'm going to step up for and speak up for because my voice is louder than theirs. It doesn't mean, Michelle, because I want the marginalized side to be equal to the others, that I don't want them to be great, right? I want Joe Burrow to be as great as he could possibly be. I want Josh Allen to be as great as he could possibly be. I want this country to be as great as it could possibly be, because if everybody here is doing well, it's all better for all of us. But I don't feel like people are willing to have that sort of nuanced conversation. And so now, because of the Outkicks, because of the Marcellus Wileys, because of the Jason Whitlocks, it's seen, or it's being framed, that I only see things one way. But that's not true, right? Because what I feel is, let's say if you're a Jason Whitlock and you were Marcellus Wiley, if you were Michele Tafoya, Ryan Clark, if everything I feel is always on one side, there's no way I'm seeing that from a manner of equality or from a manner of all perspectives as best as I can, because one side is not always right.
Correct.
Right? And
Yep.
so, you mentioned like Marcellus took me to task. Marcellus talks about me all the time. Right? And you know why I never mention him, Michelle? Because I don't need him. I don't need his approval. Me speaking his name won't help me become more popular. It won't help me become more famous. It won't help me endear myself to a group of people who I'm begging for acceptance and for validation. I don't need that. And so that's why I don't fight back on it. I saw him in person, and I handled it in person. And I will never, ever have to do it again, because I got to look in his eyes. Jason Whitlock, I don't speak of him. I don't know what he says about me. I know sometimes he has, because that's not something that I want to get into, is a back and forth with someone who is not speaking on me to have an understanding, right?
So in other words, you think that Jason Whitlock, for example, doesn't care to really have a powwow with you, have a sit down, have a heart to heart, to have any kind of conversation where you guys can connect? You don't believe that he would want that?
I don't want it. Like, I can be honest with that. I wanted it early on with Marcellus until I saw more and more of it. When he was working with Emmanuel Acho, I called Emmanuel Acho. I said, "Hey, can you give him my number? I'd like to speak to him. I'd like to understand why he feels these certain ways about me or about what I say." That was at a time where I had a level of respect for him. And he tweeted me and he was like, I verbally spar, like I want to do it on here. And like that's when I sort of realized like, okay, there's certain people that are doing it for an audience. Like as well, we can be open and honest. When I reached out to you, I was like, hey, Miss Michele, here's my number.
Yeah, you
right?
did. I give you full credit. Absolutely. The reason that we're talking today is because of you.
Yeah, and I was like, hey, I'd like to talk to you. And then you like, will you do it on the show? Absolutely, because I have nothing to hide. But I think I do that because I do have a level of respect for everyone. I do that because I don't want to see things from a one-sided view. I do that because in order for me to do a good job of bringing people together, I got to know what everybody thinks. And I will say, I'll be honest with you. I will say that when my words are misunderstood or misconstrued or used in a way that I didn't intend or I didn't mean, or when I'm just straight up lied on based on the words that you put in quotations, it does bother me. I don't have a need to be liked or to be accepted, but I do want to be represented in the correct way, in an honest way.
Yeah.
And it's accurate. That's a great, thank you so much. Like, that's why you wanted the best. I do want to be represented accurately. And then if you draw your opinion of me from an accurate depiction of who I am, I'm fine with that. And I think that was the hardest part with me when you retweeted that, because I was like, it's not what I said. And that's not what it was. And so to have an opportunity to at least be able to talk it through and say, nah, this is how I feel, I think is always a welcomed opportunity, no matter what the platform.
I am one of those people who thinks, yeah, I'd love to see a woman president someday, but I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton because she wasn't, it had nothing to do with being male or female. I didn't like her policies, period, the end. And so, everyone's talking about, we got to have that first female president. Okay, great. But shouldn't that person be worthy of it? And that's what it comes to for me in any kind of, and I certainly think Lamar Jackson is worthy of consideration for MVP. So it has nothing to do with anything except for his play on the field. Mm-hmm. How many losses do the Ravens have this season? I think that's the gripe some people have.
Yeah. So, so this is what I said. Like the Ravens have 5. Buffalo only 3. And not the argument, but the case for Josh is going to be, this was a team we didn't expect much from.
Yeah.
Right. He lost all his receivers, and look at the year they have. They beat the Kansas City Chiefs. They beat the Detroit Lions, both who only have 2 losses, one of them to Josh Allen. And in my opinion, like, I'm actually cool if either one of them wins it. Like, I'm like, hey, both of them, I think both of them deserve it. The hard part for me is like, okay, we've watched Lamar Jackson have these 2 amazing MVP seasons, and neither of them were close to as good as this one. Right. And even with having a Derrick Henry on your team who rushed for 1,900 yards, you have this historic 5,000 yard plus season. You're the first to ever go 4,000, 40, and 4. And so I just think that like both of these guys had amazing years. And I do know this. Both of them would trade the MVP if it means beating Patrick Mahomes and getting to the Super Bowl.
Absolutely no freaking question.
Because
question.
Because right now, that guy, and it's too early to start looking at it, but this feels a lot like what Tom Brady started in New England.
No question.
The way that he had that run.
I feel the same way about the Chiefs. Like every time they take the field, I feel like I'm back in Patriots world. Like this was the dynasty, this coach quarterback connection that is so unique. And they carry themselves with a confidence where You just go, who the hell is going to beat them? So let's finish with this. Who the hell is going to beat them? I mean, do you think either of those quarterbacks or teams, the Bills or the Ravens, can do? Of course, we got to believe they can do it. That's why we play the games, right?
Yeah, they can. I ain't picking them.
See, that is the thing.
Yeah, but I mean, think about, and I say this all the time. Ben Roethlisberger won 2 Super Bowls during Tom Brady's tenure in New England. We watched Joe Flacco. We watched Eli Manning. Peyton Manning. So we saw people do it, and you don't have to win as many as Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes. You just have to go win when you have the opportunity. And I think both of those guys have an opportunity this year. Zay Flowers' injury is extremely vital and important to the Baltimore Ravens. But we watched Josh do it already. And you go back to the divisional playoff game a few years ago, which is one of the best games I've ever seen. That's the 13-second touchdown drive by the Kansas City Chiefs and Tyreek Hill. Josh Allen gets that ball. Josh Allen wins that game too.
Yeah.
That's how good he was playing. And so I think we're in the golden age of quarterbacks. Somebody argued with me that it was during Tom's time because you had Ben and all those guys, but Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes all being in the same conference is absolutely insane. And I'm excited to see how it goes.
It's going to be fun.
Yes, ma'am.
It's going to be fun. There's a part of me, even all I have seen in 3 decades of covering it, you sort of go, I want to see a surprise. I want to see an upset. I want to see something new. I want to see something different happen. But either way, no matter what happens, we're going to see great football, and that's what it's all about. And
Detroit could be the new thing.
Totally.
Detroit could be the new thing, and that would be awesome. I played with Dan Campbell just early on in my career. He's the same exact human, same intensity, same work ethic, but I think the leadership that he's shown in Detroit, take a team that was 3-13-1 in his first year to 15 wins. Now, I know they don't give coach of the year a lot of times to guys who had a good team already, but if he doesn't get a lot of votes for it, I think they got the wrong people voting.
Interesting. He's an interesting dude. I would love to sit down with him for an hour sometime because I think I'd enjoy that. And I've enjoyed this, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate where you're coming from and your willingness to talk it out. And that's how I've always been too. And, I'm glad we had this conversation. And
thank you so much for your time.
I respect you, Ryan. You know that. And I wish you all the best.
Yes, ma'am. God bless.
He is brave. He does good. He's Ryan Clark. Follow his example. We'll see you next time.